So welcome to Module 1, the types of technologies for K-12 virtual education. In this module, we're going to focus on particular categories of technologies that you may want to implement, and we're going to help you identify what categories that we discuss are most interesting for you to use in your own K-12 virtual education settings. Now we have general categories of technologies. Probably many of you are familiar with these. However, I wanted to make sure for those of you that haven't ever used technology in your teaching in any sort of formal way, I want to make sure you knew the terminology and the kinds of technologies that really are available to you should you want to implement them. We'll talk about learning management systems or virtual learning environments, depending on where you're from. They're called either. We'll talk about communication and collaboration tools, specifically how to support asynchronous and synchronous learning. We'll talk about assessment tools, how to not only assess your students in their learning, but then also to assess your own teaching and your own courses. And then finally, we'll get into games, including formal games created and how to create your own games, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Now we're also going to talk about devices a little bit, and this is important because you have technologies that you can use that can be used across devices, or some technologies are very device specific, and we'll talk about why that's important. But you have desktop computers. So clearly on desktop computers you can use any of the internet kinds of technologies available, cloud-based technologies, and you can also use very specific games and content and books that publishers and other providers might give you access to. You also have laptops. Now, I keep laptops separate from desktop computers because laptops may be simple in their technology application. I think of things like Google Chromebooks and other very small, inexpensive devices that may limit the kinds of technologies or tools that you use on them, but that might also make other kinds of technologies, in Google's case, Google technologies, really easy to use. So thinking about that device will become important that your students have access to. You also have tablets and smartphones, and I separate those two because applications specific to tablets and smartphones, so not web-based applications, but applications specific to those devices may be different and may have students interact differently with them. In some cases, tablets are really valuable. There's a lot of great textbook tools out there where students can annotate on their tablet directly. That would be much harder for them to do on a smartphone. However, with smartphones, you can do a lot with the cameras, and you can do a lot with things like augmented reality that might be a little bit harder on a tablet. So thinking about those distinctly is important. And then finally, you have other hardware. So you have things like 3D printers, we're going to talk about wearable technologies. There's all sorts of other kinds of tools out there that you can bring into the class that you can use in order to create a much more rich and effective learning environment. Now with all of these, throughout this lecture, I'm going to talk about what's free so that you can go as just an ordinary teacher without any budget and hopefully utilize some of these technologies. That said, if you do have an opportunity for grants or budgets or your district has access to technologies, there's a lot that you can do, and we will highlight that as well. Now, as I mentioned before, it's important to think about the device and the browser. So not everything's going to work the same, as you know, on a device, and you want to make sure that you're using the technology that's best suited for that device. So use a tablet when a tablet's important and it has those kinds of applications that you want specific to a tablet. Use a laptop or a desktop when you're using internet-based resources and a bigger screen or more power is important. So just think about your device and think about the type of browser experience that you want to have if that's the kind of technology that you're using. Now let me just quickly highlight each of those categories and what falls into those categories, and then you'll have a chance in subsequent modules to dig in deeper to each topic. So I mentioned before we have learning management systems or virtual learning environments. This is really about recreating a classroom online. And that's important because especially if you're teaching fully online, fully virtual K-12 students, you need to be able to have a place where you can have administrative tools, you can have your syllabus, you can have students submit work, And you can have students collaborate and do all those other things that you want to have them do. You need a classroom, a physical classroom online, and that's what these kinds of technologies can do. They also help you distribute content and manage grades. So you're able to get students the kinds of materials they need really easily remotely, and you're able to then give students the kind of feedback they need based on the work that they do. As I mentioned, you can collect work, and you can use it to communicate with students or to encourage students to communicate with one another. You also can use it to assess your students. There's a lot of rich data just specific to an LMS or a VLE that can give you insight into how well your students are doing, help you intervene early if there are issues with your students, and then help you show the progress of your students and to others that need to see that. The second category of technologies is communication and collaboration tools. These provide both asynchronous and synchronous interaction. They also allow you to have peer-to-peer interaction, and this becomes important. Remember, the kind of student that you're working with wants to be social or needs to be social, and the kinds of learning approaches that many of us are using in virtual education require students to interact and work with one another. It's no longer about independent passive work. So having tools that allow students to do that is really important. You also have the ability to allow for group collaboration, formal group projects, or even broader class collaboration, depending on the kinds of activities you're doing. Communication and collaboration tools are also great for coaching and office hours, where you may need to do some one-on-one work or some small group work with your students. And they can allow you to socially interact with your students. Many of the communication and collaboration tools are embedded in social networks or connect very easily to social networks. The third category of tools are assessment tools. These allow you to evaluate your students, which is really important, in any moment as they're working through the course, especially if you design your course in such a way that it's meant to give you regular feedback on student performance. This also allows you to evaluate course success and your own teaching. It helps you align and report on the outcomes that your students may need to accomplish or that you need to accomplish in the teaching and learning experience. And it can allow you to do some peer review. We're going to play with peer review in this course, but keep in mind that peer review can be a very valuable way for students to help not only each other in the learning process, but get a deeper understanding and reflection of what quality work or what the skills are that you're trying to have them to grow or to learn. And finally, assessment tools are a great way to gather feedback. We're going to do some of this in this course as well. It's just a great way to understand how are students feeling about the learning experience so that you can help find ways to make it more engaging. And finally, it allows you to encourage reflection. And reflection is important in the learning experience. We know this. It's important in our own teaching. And if we give students opportunities to reflect, they're going to build it in their daily lives and grow that skill as lifelong learners. The final category that we're going to talk about are games. And this will include do-it-yourself games or ways to path or level or grow students in a kind of interactive and fun environment that they're used to. It also can help encourage healthy competition. I know this is a difficult one for a lot of teachers to debate over, because should competition exist or should it not in your classroom? Well, using games in the right way can help create a healthy competition, and we'll make sure we discuss what that healthy competition might be. Promoting exploration. Games allow you to help students explore or develop or be creative on their own paths, which is very important for students today. They come wanting to do that, and it helps them grow. It also can help them simulate the real world. There are some very serious games that we'll talk about that do develop very specific skills or help students understand the consequences based on decisions that can be very important to particular disciplines or careers. And then finally, games can be very helpful in motivating students. When we think about how students want to learn and how they come in already as learners, oftentimes games are a part of that. So let's take a moment to apply and reflect on the kinds of technologies or the categories of technologies. Let's think about you as a foreign language teacher, and you have students aged 13 to 16. You want to help improve student interaction and support in your classroom. So you want them to interact and help each other, and you want to create this supportive environment, but challenging environment. So what kinds of technologies might you use? Or if you're thinking about your own practice, think about where your students aren't interacting with one another and you want to encourage them to do that. Which kinds of technologies might you use?